All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We'll take a few moments just to let everyone connect. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for the delay in getting started. Again, hello. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited about tonight's program, celebrating the Horn Book and all the wonderful work that they do. My name is David Feinstein. I'm the literacy educator at the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art. Thank you for joining us and our partners at the Horn Book. Yay, we're celebrating their 100th year. Congratulations. Yes. Thank you for joining. We're so excited for our program tonight, cover to cover, reimagining familiar stories with different faces. A few quick updates before we get started. We'd love to hear from all of our guests, so feel free to use the chat button to say hi, let us know where you're joining from, and you can keep an eye on that chat feature because during the program, we'll be sharing some additional information and links in that spot. Also, I'm going to invite you to use the Q&A button to share any questions that you might have for our panelists. We're going to save some time at the end of the program for those questions. Um, Finally, really glad to let everyone know that our program is being recorded. So if you miss anything or you want to share with a friend who couldn't make it tonight, we should have it on the Eric Carle Museum's YouTube page in the next week or two. Okay, so now, finally, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Elissa Gershowitz, the editor-in-chief at Hornbook, to introduce our program and our wonderful group of panelists. Welcome, Elissa.
Hi, thank you so much, David. I'm Elissa Gershowitz, editor-in-chief of the Hornbook, and I am so thrilled to be welcoming you to our second live virtual cover-to-cover event, graciously hosted by the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art during the Hornbook magazine's 100th anniversary year. The Hornbook was founded in Boston in 1924 by Bertha Mahoney Miller in order to blow the horn for fine books for young people, and we have been devoted to that mission ever since. We'll be celebrating all year long, and you can find more information on our website, hbooks.com, including new Hornbook swag for sale. Our March-April issue of the magazine was the first in a very long time to feature a portrait photograph on the cover. That picture was taken by Kristen Joy Emack, whose photo essay, Reimagining Familiar Stories with Different Faces, appears inside. I am lucky enough to know Kristen in her many capacities, as a warm, kind, and creative educator, as a friend, and as a 2022 Guggenheim Fellow, thank you very much, among other awards and recognition for her glorious photography. Kristen will be speaking primarily with Marva Hinton, the Hornbook's wonderful articles development editor, with special guest participation by some of the girls in the photo series. And we'll save time at the end for questions. So without further ado, welcome, Kristen, and thank you, Marva.
Thanks so much, Elissa. This is such a great event. I'm so pleased. Thank you again for having us. Kristen, I thought maybe we could just get started by talking about how this all began. The Hornbook, the editors were talking about what we wanted to do for our mini theme issue of folklore and poetry that was going to be coming out in March. And Elissa said, well, a couple of years ago, we did a special with Kristen where you featured photographs of your daughter, Apple, in various poses related to fairy tales and various, costumes related to fairy tales. And so I went back and looked at that because I wasn't working at the Hornbook at that time. And I thought, oh, these are amazing. So I reached out to you to get permission. At that point, we thought, oh, we'll just rerun those. And I think just with the two of us talking, we decided, maybe we should update that. And I think we talked about at first you possibly doing a new essay to go along with the old photographs. And somewhere along the line, we decided, no, we should do something completely new. So, Kristen, just tell me, what were your thoughts when I said, how do you feel about doing something completely new, fairy tales, featuring your daughter and maybe some of her friends today?
Thank you for the nice introduction, Marva and Elissa. I just want to say before I start, thank you so much for allowing me to collaborate with the Horn Book. It's really an honor. And I wanted to thank the Eric Carle Museum for hosting us tonight. I think it's a very exciting moment for me, particularly because some of the girls who I photographed have joined us. And most of the girls I've known for a very long time, since they were quite little. So it's just a really beautiful full circle for me. So in 2018, I did have this original series that I had created with my daughter that was shared in the Horn Book on their digital page. And just a little bit of background about that series. It started actually not really to be a series meant to be shared with anybody. And I delight at the idea that this thing that my daughter and I created just went on to have a life of its own, even though that wasn't the intention. And it came about because as an early childhood educator that I was at that time and a mother of a young child, we read a lot of fairy tales. And at some point, when Apple was about 5, she asked, how come all the characters in my fairy tales are white? It wasn't a surprising question, but we decided at that time that illustrators make decisions about what goes into books for children, and that we could own that and we could be the illustrators of our own stories. And so we set about to do several different photo shoots with Apple, making a nod to different fairy tale characters such as Little Red Riding Hood, Rumpelstiltskin. We threw in Alice in Wonderland and Beauty and the Beast, which was her favorite story at that time. So we read multiple versions of that story. And so anyway, it went on to have a life of its own. It was in the Horn Book. I've learned a few years ago that series was actually shared in a children's literature class at Tufts, which was super exciting. So when Marva, when you contacted me and just, thought perhaps I might be interested in doing something again, I was immediately interested. And I was trying to think of like how to do it again in a way that would be interesting, in a way that would also suit the needs of my daughter. Of course, I didn't know I was going to do her friends at that time because I knew she was at a different age. She's just about to turn 17 next week. And I knew she was not going to be comfortable embodying different fairy tale characters, directly. And then somehow or another, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to extend this project by actually photographing some of her friends? And that's what we set about to do. And the intention was not to have them be particular fairy tale characters, but to really make a very open-ended fairy tale-esque nod to the kinds of energy and feelings that come out of fairy tales.
And when we first talked about this, the idea was that you were going to write something. You were going to write an essay to go along with these. And then somewhere along the line, you were talking to the girls, and it was decided that they would do a response. So can you tell me how you decided that? Is that through something that came up when you were talking to the girls, or just explain how that came to be?
Well, one of the major reasons for doing this project is because representation, accurate, authentic representation is so important. And here I was photographing the girls. That's something that, they were collaborators in a way, but in the end, I really still own I still command that space because I'm the photographer and it's my vision. So I just thought it would be really, it would be much more appropriate to ask them to at least put their voice to the images and to hear what they had to say. And so something unexpected happened, which is also, very wonderful when projects start, that there's always the magic that can happen when you're starting something new and it's some sort of creative endeavor. And what happened was that Abby ended up writing instead of just giving me a quote, she really wrote a very heartfelt, poignant and assertive essay or answer to the question, what do fairy tales mean for you? And she gave a response that I'll let her speak to later, but about her experience being the lead role in a middle school play. I think that was a middle school play, Abby, you can correct me if I'm wrong, where she, as a Black girl, was required to wear a blonde wig in order to be believable in this role. And so at the end of her essay, she kind of says at the end, like, I don't really think I believe in revision, you know, from an exhausted point of view. And I thought, well, this whole project we're doing is about revision. So what am I going to do about that? I can't tell Abby not to express that. She's exhausted, or has felt some exhaustion by being a young Black girl and feeling that she doesn't have a place in these tales that we talk about in school and we see revised on television and movies, etc. So the idea to frame the story with Abby's stories first, and then my essay became an answer to her and the other girls' quotes about really feeling left out of and unrecognized and unreflected in fairy tales.
Well, I think it would be nice maybe to bring some of the girls in now. Abby, your essay, as Kristen mentioned, was just so powerful and very touching. And I'd like to get your thoughts for when she first approached you about this project. What did you think? And then did your thoughts change at all when you saw what she had done?
Hi. Yeah, so I grew up with Kristen's daughter, Apple. And so I've watched Kristen's photography, her various series, and her work progress over my life. And I remember when I was younger, I would see she in her office, because I went to the elementary school that Kristen works at, and I'd see it on her walls depict the series of Apple when she was younger. So when she approached me about this, I was sort of immediately intrigued, and I knew that I wanted to be involved, and I didn't really know that I felt those things about fairy tales and about revisionist stories until I finished my essay, until I was writing that conclusion, and that's just how I was feeling. But I don't know if I've been if I've been particularly persuaded in the opposite direction, but I definitely have a greater understanding of just the importance of representation, reading the quotes from the other young girls of color involved, especially in the series, and a much larger appreciation for photography, for the work that Kristen does. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'd like to get the other girls involved. If you'd like to just talk about what you thought when you were first approached about participating in the project, and then what you thought when you saw the images. That's just open to anyone who'd like to answer.
I think that I was very flattered when Apple told me that that Kristen wanted to photo shoot me for this project. I hadn't really heard of it before because I feel like Apple is generally a little bit private about the photo shoots and everything like that. But I had seen pictures just like that that maybe my mom had sent me that she found online. And I was like, Apple, I didn't know anything about this. So I think that it was a beautiful thing being a part of this whole project. And I remember seeing the results. The one that's in the magazine, where you kind of see like the butterflies in my hair. I think that one was really fun because I liked the props and kind of how I kind of became almost one with nature when I was on the rock, and my hair kind of flowed with the rock, and the butterflies were in my hair. And I remember Apple putting them in accordingly, how she kind of liked the way they looked, and that was a lot of fun for me. And the result was very, very beautiful because I actually had no idea what it could even look like, but it was just there it is. There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of like the way my hair mixes with the rock, and it was really fun.
Yeah, it was also a fun experience as well. And I went with Sola, we went together, but I was just accompanying her and we weren't supposed to do it together. But then this was a photo that my mom took that's not in the magazine, but it's a photo that we both really loved. And it was just overall a very fun experience getting to do it with her and just a friend.
Okay. Maria, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I've also known Kristen for a really long time. And I've seen like the various projects that she's been involved with. And it wasn't my first time participating in one of her projects, and so I felt really happy to like sort of like be called back to say, and it was, yeah, I went with Abby. We did our photo shoot together. And it was really different because yeah, like Sola said, it was, I think, well, my second and my first time, but like using props. And it was so cool because Kristen was just telling us to like stand in random places or like like lay down in like this like bush, and I'm just like, okay, like I'll trust the process. But it was so amazing to see the pictures, and it always is. Like, it always comes out like magical. Um so yeah, I was very happy to be able to participate.
Thank you, Sharia.
Kristen, can you talk a little bit more about what you were going for with these images? Because as you said before, you weren't trying to say recreate what you did with Apple back in 20 I'm sorry,
2018. Well,
2018.
2018 when it was when we had it published, but she was 5 when we did it, 5 and 6.
Right. So you weren't trying to, do again what you did when she was 5, but you mentioned you were trying to get a certain feeling. So just describe to me what you were going for and how you went about achieving that.
Well, I do have this lifelong love of fairy tales. I can really see fairy tale. I mean, I didn't know it at the time. I have this long term series called Cousins that was published as a photo book last spring. And after everything was said and done, when I look at some of those images, even though it's documentary work. Ooh, sorry, I can hear a big ambulance going by. I can feel in some of those images my love of fairy tales and the themes of fairy tales kind of emerging into some of these images. So it's just a way I have of looking at the world and structuring the world too. So it's just within me. So I just really was thinking about the themes that resonate in so many fairy tales. Mystery, magical realism, connection to nature, transformation, transmuting, these types of things. And so that started to come out. And then of course there's some other things that were just symbols like crowns, might have shown up. And I did use a crown for 2 of the girls, an actual crown. And then with Sharia's picture, we created a crown on the ground. But starting with Abby's photo, that's Siobhan, but starting with and I'll talk about that one in a second, but with Abby's photo, I had seen a show like maybe the week prior to photographing her, and there was a folkloric character in this show, a Native American folkloric character, who actually, I mean, I would actually say she has a lot of the same qualities that I see and admire in Abby. Fierce feminist and fiercely the character was fierce feminist and fiercely like connected to knowing what's right and standing up for that. So I just had this idea in my mind, and she was called the deer lady. So I had this idea in my mind, and we just took this blanket to the well, actually this is in a cemetery. But what I do want to say about shooting with Abby and Sharia is like which is also what happened with the rest of the girls, but like the openness of the girls to just allow me to say, let's go here, let's go there, stand here, stand there. They were just so open to that process. So we photographed Abby first, and we took a few images of Sharia. And of course, if there's any photographers on the Zoom, they know that it takes a lot of photographs to get to the one that you want to use. And just like Sola and Apple shared the image that they liked even more than the one that was shared in the magazine that maybe speaks to them more loudly. So we took a few images of both of the girls, and the the pine cones as a crown just came once I saw Sharia with her gorgeous hair spread out in the ivy to just quickly put these around, and it worked.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you prepared them for these photos. Did you tell them to wear certain things or to style their hair in a certain way? Just what, if any, instructions did you give them?
Well, you know, the basis of most fairy tales, right? That what separates them from myths and maybe more written tales that were for the wealthy way back in the day, is that they're tales of ordinary people. So I did not ask them to do anything else. I really was looking for the environment to feed that energy into the image and to, you know, perhaps collaborate subconsciously or consciously with the girls. You know, it was really nice to hear Sola say that she looked at the picture afterwards and that she felt like she was kind of, you know, having this transformation, that she was connected to, that her hair became part of that rock and the moss and the things that we think of in nature. So they came just as they were, and we just worked with what they had. And almost all of the props really just were things that came to me in the moment, except for the crown that you'll see in the picture of one of the Claras and in Siobhan.
And how long did it take you for each one of these shoots?
I was just gonna say probably longer than they wanted, but maybe a half an hour, sometimes up to an hour. I would say Sola and Apple were at least up to an hour. Sharia and Abby were shorter. One of the Claras was pretty short. The other Clara was very short because it was very cold. She was one of the last ones. And I think maybe Apple, the last, when we photographed Wayne, it was also cold and probably a bit short. It was raining, yeah, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the cover. It's just so stunning. I know for our part with the Hornbook editors, when we saw that, we said, oh, that's so beautiful. That just has it so powerful as well, that really should be the cover. And of course, we couldn't tell you that until it was finalized. But once you found that out, just what was your reaction, and particularly what was your reaction to knowing that shot had been chosen for the cover?
Well, my first reaction was I couldn't believe it, because I almost didn't submit that image to you, because
Oh,
it's the
wow.
only one in the series that's black and white. So I wasn't sure, but I loved it, and I just couldn't say no to it. So I did submit, you know, a few options for each girl, and I just was delighted that was the cover. It's really an honor. I also think that really captures Sola and Apple and their relationship. So it was nice to see that as well.
Okay, so of course, Sola and Apple, we have to hear from you. When you first heard the news from Kristen, what was your reaction? And when you actually saw it, what did you think?
We were both shocked.
Yeah,
we
we were
didn't
pretty
expect
shocked.
us to be the cover of the magazine.
Right, and this photo is such a beautiful photo, and I think that like you see like the image caught here, but like I remember during the shoot, Kristen was like, oh, like you can play music if you want, like kind of like what would like best kind of get you like calmed down, kind of like connected to like yourself in the world. And I remember like I was playing like certain types of music, and I remember like the specific song for this photo like exactly, and Kristen was saying how like for certain songs that really like connected with me and like resonated with me, my face would like change and I got very like stoic. It was like very calm music, and I think that is really like reflected in this photo, and seeing it on the cover was really amazing. And like it's a beautiful photo of me and Apple itself. Yeah.
I think
What
one of the
I'm sorry,
things
go ahead, Kristen.
sorry, one of the things that I do really appreciate about this photo is that every time I look at it, I think like they look like the reluctant princesses. And I think that's an appropriate but unseen way of looking at the traditional typical way that we've looked at princesses. And I feel there's a weight to this portrait. And I like that. I like adding that element into the idea. I think it gives depth to the idea of revising what we think of when we think of a fairy tale princess.
I feel like the black and white just adds a lot of drama to the photo as well, that a lot of us responded to at the Hornbook. Sola and Apple, what about your family, your friends? What did they say when they saw this?
My mom was obviously very like, I want to frame it, like
Mhm.
I'm showing this to my grandma, like kind of all of that. But I think for my friends, I didn't really tell many of them.
Yeah, same with me. None of my friends know, except for the people who are in the project.
Right. But this one person at school did approach me and was like, were you on the cover of the phone book? And I was like,
Really?
yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't really know him, but it was kind of like, it was weird being recognized from someone who I wasn't really acquainted with before the photo. But when I saw it also, like I got a photo of it like kind of just online, but I think seeing it like the actual like magazine itself, it was a lot more real and it was a lot more like beautiful to see it in person as a cover of
Yeah,
like
exactly. Like seeing it in person.
especially on like the 100-year anniversary, like it kind of like meant a lot to me.
Well, we're so glad that you did it. It's just, again, a beautiful photo and so unusual for us and just wonderful for our centennial. I wanted to go back to Abby because your photo I felt like was so powerful and strong. And Kristen sort of talked about that a little bit. I want to know when you saw that, did you feel like, oh, that's me, that she captured who you were there?
Um, I would say I would say no, honestly, but I think it's such a beautiful it's such a beautiful picture, and just the concept, like the blanket, when like Sharia was saying, when we were there, um it's really, I really didn't understand, like I didn't really understand how like what Chris what how what excuse me how what Kristen was instructing us to do would produce like the fairy tale esque that she was trying to achieve. I couldn't see it in my mind. I couldn't visualize it. um I've grown to really really love this photo. It's just personally, it's just hard for me to really um like um the photographs of myself. um I think Kristen does such a brilliant job of capturing um the innocence that we typically associate with fairy tale characters, fairy tale princesses. And so I think that's really where the sort of disconnect stems from. Is I feel like that image, I if I feel like I I don't know, look a lot, just look very like young, and I don't know, it doesn't, I don't know if it um really embodies me, but that's, I don't think that's the point of the photograph either.
Right. She was, again, going for a feeling and, representing our theme of fairy tales. Uh, Sharia, I wanted to give you a chance also. We talked a little bit about your photo, but just a little more. You said when you were doing the shoot, you didn't quite get what she was doing, but then when you saw it, what did you think?
Yeah, well, Kristen hadn't really like told us what her vision was until we got in the car and we were driving to the cemetery. Um, so I was just like kind of just like I said earlier, like very like trust the process, like, whatever she has in mind, I'm sure it's gonna be beautiful. But I I felt like at first, like the clothes that I had come dressed in that day didn't really match the vibe, like the ivy and the pine cones. And so I felt kind of like weird about it while I was like the camera was in my face. I was like, is this gonna work? Um, but it's like I don't like know how she did it, but it turned out like amazing. Um, and I don't know, it's like something, a part of my identity that I consider really important is my hair. And so I really love that she brought so much attention to my hair, and like the length of it is really important to me. Um, and I just like love how it turned out in general. But yeah.
Thank you, Sharia. I've just a funny sidebar to the day I photographed Abby and Sharia is that we were photographing right outside of a crypt. And the door was open, and that's actually where Abby is standing. And I knew what it was. And I think one of the girls might have said, I wonder what that is in there. And I was like, yeah, I'm not really, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Because I could see that there was a great backdrop for an image. And then so I told the girls afterwards, like, oh yeah, that's where bodies go. So that was just interesting. And then we ended up getting locked into the cemetery accidentally.
Okay.
We couldn't get out. They locked the gates, and we had to wait for the city to come get us out.
Oh, wow. I hope you didn't have to wait too long.
We didn't have to wait too long.
Okay. I'd like to talk about some of the other images now where the young ladies aren't with us tonight. Kristen, just to give you an opportunity to talk about those. I know we've covered a few of them, but let's see. David, can you put some of those up so we can? Yes, let's talk about this one. This is a.
Can we make that one a little smaller so we fit the whole?
Yeah, so we can see a little bit more of it.
Yeah. So it might sound funny to people listening that I would have photographed in a cemetery, but cemeteries, particularly Mount Auburn Cemetery, is beautifully landscaped. So it's a gorgeous place to see nature. And also, fairy tales deal with very heavy themes of life and death, and again, transformations and life cycles, circadian themes. So it worked very well for me as a backdrop. And this is a different cemetery than Abby and Sharia were at, and there were no open crypts. But the lovely thing about this story with Siobhan is that I had photographed her. We had gotten a few nice things, but I hadn't gotten it quite the way I wanted to. I just couldn't, I wasn't answering the feeling I had of the image that I wanted to create. And we pulled up to a spot, and there was a hill full of this unbloomed flowers. And I was thinking, God, I would so love for Siobhan just to go sit in that big bushel of flowers. And I thought, but I can't ask her that. And a second later, she turned to me and she goes, I should go sit in that. And I was like, let's go. And so she just went out, and she really commanded it. I think, I hear what Abby and Sharia were saying about, their feelings of not really knowing what was going to happen with the photographs. But one thing I did feel came out of all of the images is that there is self-agency with the girls. They have their own self-agency, and perhaps might be somewhat vulnerable, or there might be tension. I think, Abby, that's what I see in that image of both of you. I see like the reluctance and the heaviness in the image with Sola and Apple that's on the cover. I see like I see Sharia's image as like a yielding into a part of herself that maybe she doesn't always show, but it's very commanding in that photo. And, you can see in Siobhan's stance here that she is really working with me. She is in this photo, and she's allowing like this part of her presence to come out. And I think that happened with all of them. And the reason I'm pointing that out is that the Disneyfying of all of fairy tales, that were written or collected, actually not even written, but collected hundreds of years ago. And then how we know it in our age are really mostly from Disney movies. At least a lot of the girls' quotes were about that. And one of the things lacking in fairy tales that we know is a strong female presence. And I just loved the alchemy of working with the girls, and that like just naturally they put that out, like their real selves have a complexity, a tension, a sensuality, a vulnerability, and all of these things. And I thought these are wonderful attributes as we're talking about revising fairy tales, or the possibility of a revisionist perspective of fairy tales, to that the girls could just put this out there into the world and change how we look at what a princess is or what a fairy tale character is.
And as we mentioned a little earlier, each girl had an opportunity to write something that went along with this photo essay of yours, their response to this. And I wanted to give, I know Abby's already spoken, but if there are any other girls who would like to talk about just what it meant to them to sort of be represented in this after not having that type of representation when they were young girls and first introduced to these fairy tales. Your mic isn't on. I think if you're trying to talk. So, no? Okay.
Marva,
It's fine. It's fine if you don't want to, but they were, if for anyone who hasn't had a chance to see it, each girl had an opportunity to, address this issue, and a lot of them told very compelling stories from how they felt as young girls about fairy tales when they would read these and not see themselves represented in those. So if anyone who's watching now wants to learn more, please go and read that, because they were very touching stories that they shared.
Marva, before we move, I know pretty soon the Q&A part will come up. Could we cycle through the rest of the images?
Oh, yes, I would definitely like to do that. David, can we get those up, please?
So this is the last image. This is Wayne, who was not able to join us tonight, but this was the last image of this project before the deadline. And I think that I think with the hood and the red berries, there's a nod to Little Red Riding Hood, although it's not really intended to be like that, exactly that. This is an image of my niece, Kayla. Kayla, one of the stories that Kayla told was very poignant. She just told a story of being a young girl at the city swimming pool. She was playing with several friends. All of her friends were white. They were playing mermaid. She was super excited and she wanted to play the mermaid. And her friends all said to her, "No, not with your hair. You can't be the mermaid. You have to be the sea monster." So Kayla has carried the pain of that story. She describes it in her quote as really wanting to be something beautiful and being told, "No, you can't be the beautiful thing. You have to be the sea witch." I think that's what it was. So Kayla's story of not feeling like she was allowed to be the beautiful character in a tale has really stayed with her. Kayla's a junior in college now, and she still talks about it. Yeah, this one we'll just wait till it gets a little smaller. Thank you, David. This is Clara, another friend of Apple's. I just really, again, see this. I see Claire's willingness to just like collaborate with me with this like strong energy and presence. And she like held my gaze the entire time that I photographed her, which is really remarkable. I don't, any photographers on here know that it's very hard to be photographed. Photographers don't like being photographed. And, I'm so thankful to Clara for being able to have like the self-agency to just present herself. And we had fun with it. It was very cold. She was a really great model. It was freezing that day.
It almost looks like she's imprisoned, I noticed with that one.
Yes. And let's see, the next one is my niece, Leah. I'll just tell a quick story that one of the things that's so wonderful about creating these images and putting them out into the world, first of all, that we're creating images that don't really exist or hardly exist. So that's great. Images of Black girls of color. But I have a young student at the elementary school I work at, and she comes into my office once or twice every week for the last couple of weeks just to flip through the hornbook. And she particularly loves this image. And she's Haitian American. So, for her, she's seeing something that she hasn't seen before, and she needs to keep coming back to see it again and again. So I feel like the potential for this project to have impact is really present. I think we might have two more images. Oh, three more. So this is Apple, and this is kind of a remake of an image that we took when I first made the project with her when she was 5. One of the things I love about this image is that she really has like her, she's a young woman here. She has a feminine figure and a more adult clothes, and her stance is again full of self-agency. And this is Clara Ruby. She's the other Clara in here. Thank you. I met Clara when Clara was in kindergarten, and I fell in love with her the moment that she said I overheard her say to my daughter, "We're gonna go outside and we're gonna play Lord of the Rings, and I'll be Gandalf and you can be Eowyn." And I just loved this child who was so young and whose imagination was already so broad and big that she was already wanting to play out these dynamic, although Lord of the Rings is not a fairy tale, but it still has the, it has the gallantry and that belongs in fairy tales, and it's a fantastical tale. So it just was right for this image to wind up in the series. This is, of course, Sola, the one she was mentioning. And we can make this one a little bit smaller. So Sophia is the only young woman in the series whose photo was not taken in Cambridge and was not taken and who's not a Cambridge resident. And I'm just saying that because there is something very exciting about this. There's something exciting about sharing this project with other people from the city that all the rest of the girls are in, because it's, they're local and there's some real pride in that. Sophia, this was taken at Walden Pond, and I feel like it has a very Ophelia kind of energy to it. I love the element of water and and reflection that comes with it. And I think that's it. I think we've cycled through all of the images, which would put us right close to Q&A time.
Right. So if you are watching and you have questions for Kristen, or if you have a question for one of the girls, please put the question in the chat or in the Q&A feature, and we will get some answers for you. So just some of the comments, Kristen, we've been getting while everyone was talking is that a lot of people have said these images are so powerful. People have said they are just sort of captivated and they've been enjoying flipping through these and looking at them. I'm wondering, while we're waiting on some more, if you could talk a little bit about any challenges that you faced as a photographer in getting these images. You mentioned that sometimes the conditions weren't so great in terms of the weather, or having to work a little bit longer to get a shot than you maybe your subjects would have liked. So just anything about that you can tell us about challenges you encountered.
I kind of love a small challenge. I love the possibility that exists in taking a background and creating something magical out of it. So, if I told you where some of the, like, obviously we don't know that Abby's standing in front of a crypt. I think that's kind of a funny one. But I like ordinary spaces and being able to find the magic in them. So there's a fun feeling to that kind of challenge.
Well, one question we have is, did the girls have a say in what you submitted?
I would say that is a big no. But I don't remember. I guess the girls can really can talk about that. Some of the girls there were more images that I had to choose from. Like Abby and Sharia, there was only just a few that came out, and they were at the beginning, so made more sense.
Okay. Let's see. Another question we have here is, what were some things that surprised you along the way, other than getting locked into Mount Auburn?
Oh, I think what surprised me was how much I really loved doing it, and I would like to actually extend this project. I don't know how yet, but I don't feel like I'm exactly done with it, and that came as a surprise. I also, while this is not exactly a surprise, I really loved the opportunity to write about fairy tales and to have my own essay included. It's another side of myself that I was able to express myself through writing. It's a side that I like and I would like to do more of. So that was really was excellent opportunity.
And let's see, we have a question here about what do you like to read for fun? I think this may be directed to the girls. And has this experience enticed you to try or revisit YA or adult fantasy novels? So that's open to any of the girls. What do you like to read? And are you interested at all in YA or adult fantasy? Don't all answer at once.
I haven't always been the biggest fantasy person. I don't really read a lot of fantasy books, although recently I've become a fan of this like sci-fi series. But yeah, that's just me, but I don't typically read a lot of fantasy or a lot of sci-fi.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I also can say that I don't really read that much fantasy now, at least. I feel like I used to. But I have always been more, um, like I've always found more interest in movies because I just think they're more like visually and like pleasing and just more interesting to me. Um, so I watched a lot of Disney movies, not all of them, but most of them, and sorry, I didn't get to answer your question from before, but I sort of talked about that in my response because I I love Disney movies, um, but I sort of realized when the live action for Aladdin came out a couple years ago, I realized that there's not really much representation for or any representation for South Asian people in Disney, and it's like I feel like it was just kind of like cool, but also sad to like see that Jasmine was the closest thing I'd have to like a familiar face. Um, and it just like it was interesting because I never really thought about race in these fantasy like stuff because I was always just so um I always found the stories more interesting rather than the appearance of the characters. Um, but yeah, I think that realization was kind of interesting to have. And like, I'm hoping that maybe in the future they decide to create more South Asian princesses or not princesses, but yeah.
Thanks, Sharia.
Anyone else want to talk about what you like to read? You have any interest in fantasy? If not, we can move on. We have another question for Kristen. This is about editing. How much editing did you do to the photos? And do you use Photoshop?
I don't use Photoshop and I do very little editing to photos. So I might add or subtract some exposure. I might add or subtract a little saturation and do a little sharpening, and that's it.
Okay. I know we talked a little bit at the beginning about the photo that made the cover and the fact that Sola and Apple, that wasn't really their favorite photo going in. Can you speak to that a little bit, Kristen, about how does that play out with something like this for the other girls? Have you heard anyone say, "Oh, was sort of my favorite photo, and you chose a different one," and just speak to uh, how you dealt with that and what that means in terms of what you captured with the image?
Well, I do think there's a complicated, or not complicated, but there's some nuances between the person who's taking the photos and the people who are the subjects, especially if there's a direct intention of the work. So, when I was choosing the photos, I was looking to see if my impression or my feeling about fairy tales was captured in it. So what I captured in, say, Siobhan's photo in the green grass may not be at all of what she was, thought was going to happen or what she hoped would happen. I mean, I do know that she does really love that photo, but it may not. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that the end result, that we may have been collaborating during the photo shoot, but the end result really ends up becoming something that I own more than the girls. And that's not how I work in all of my work. But for this type of series, kind of like at some point the collaborative piece for the girls stops. However, if one of the girls had told me, like, I really cannot stand what I look like in one of these images, I would respect that as a woman in the world. I understand what it feels like to I mean, I just recently had an image of myself that went a lot of different places, and I really don't like the image at all. And every time I saw it, I was like, oh. So it's very possible the girls might have that experience as well.
Let's see, we've got one more question here. We'll end this question. It's from Shirley Harvey. She says, you said you like a small challenge, but this seems like a big challenge to try and change the way people have envisioned princesses for many moons. Why did it become a project for you, and were you ever discouraged?
Oh my gosh, that's a wonderful question, Shirley Harvey. Well, I mean, this series ties into the things that I care about, and I know I saw Lynn Van Auken ask about, like, what did the girls read, etc. So I think she was trying to get at kind of like what makes their inner world, and I would say that what I choose to photograph is representative of what my inner world, and how that generates what I care about, what I look for, what I do and think about, and invest in my outer life. And so, I started this by saying that I know all of the girls in the series, although one was newer to me. And some of the girls I've loved for a long time and have other connections to their lives in different ways, and other memories that we've created together, etc. So representation is a positive representation out in the world is important to me. And I just know that from a lot of my photography work, I'm thinking about the importance of creating more imagery that has positive representation of people of color, but in this case of girls of color, and just creating more of it, because there needs to be more of it out there. And so that is a big impetus of the work. And also I see through the lens of in a more like in a less practical way, I also just connect with the world and make sense of the world. My sense making is connected to things like magical realism and the transformation of things and a love of nature. So this project just kind of naturally embodied all of the my political position in what I care about in the world, and also sort of my inner workings about what I'm drawn to and what I feel close to, or how I make sense of the world, all coming together as one.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen, for sharing your images with us. It's a lovely photo essay. Also, we want to thank all the girls for participating in the series with Kristen, and for joining us here this evening. Sharia, Sola, Apple, and Abigail, thank you all so much. Thank you to the Carl Museum, and thank you also to Elissa. This has been a lovely webinar. I've enjoyed speaking with all of you. There's information in the chat for anyone who wants to know how to see the series, or who would like to learn more about the Hornbook. Again, thank you all for joining us, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.